Imagine a blade stopping exactly 0.5 millimeter from a child's heart. You would think surviving that exact moment, surviving the knife itself, would be the hardest part of the story.
Right. You'd think it would be the end of the nightmare.
Exactly. But the massive cache of classified documents we are unpacking today for this deep dive reveals that surviving the physical attack was, it was really just the beginning.
Yeah, because the real fight was surviving the 14-year, $3 billion silent war initiated by their own government immediately after.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We have a lot to cover.
We really do. I mean, it is an incredibly dense, complex web we are looking at today. We are analyzing a staggering $3.098 billion legal and administrative action.
Yeah, a massive number.
Huge. And the filings refer to it as the sovereign audit, which is essentially a forensic deconstruction of what the documents call the Canadian state's architecture of silence.
And just looking at the scope of what we're digging into, we are looking at tribunal submissions, intercepted emails, UN human rights complaints, and even deeply rooted historical records.
It's a mountain of evidence.
But before we go a single step further, I need to establish a very strict protocol with you, the listener. Because of the extreme gravity of the ongoing risks surrounding this case, the sources have demanded absolute security regarding identities.
Right, and that is not something we take lightly.
No, absolutely not. So to protect the victims at the center of this systemic collapse, absolutely no family surnames will be used today. None.
So we will exclusively be using the titles found in the filings.
Correct. The subjects of this deep dive will be referred to exclusively as the Sovereign Father and his First Nation son, Baron.
And honestly, that level of security right out of the gate, it should signal to everyone that we aren't dealing with a standard administrative dispute here.
Yeah, this isn't just about a delayed check in the mail.
Exactly. This is a highly calculated unraveling of systemic failure at multiple levels of government.
So, to understand how a bureaucratic dispute escalates into a $3 billion lawsuit, we can't start by looking at the paperwork. We actually have to start at the physical ground zero.
Right, the catalyst for everything.
Yeah, we have to go back to February 14th, 2021.
Yeah.
And I need to be incredibly precise about this date because getting the timeline exactly right is the cornerstone of the forensic audit that the Sovereign Father has built.
It is the anchor of his whole case.
Exactly. The official police and state narratives have, at times, they've muddied the waters on this date, but the filings are unequivocal. February 14, 2021 was a Sunday.
Yes, and the documents specifically refer to it as Sunday, Bloody Sunday.
Right. It was absolutely not a Tuesday, so why does a discrepancy of, just a couple of days matter so much in a case like this?
Well, because in forensic legal audits, timelines are literally everything. I mean, if a state agency can subtly shift the official date of an incident from a Sunday to a Tuesday, it changes everything.
It changes the whole context.
Exactly. It changes who was on shift, which emergency protocols were legally mandated to trigger, and what the accepted response times should have been.
So correcting the chronology to Sunday, Bloody Sunday is really the Sovereign Father's way of locking the state into the exact legal parameters of their failure on that specific day.
Right. It stops them from rewriting the administrative history.
And what actually happened on that Sunday is just harrowing.
Yeah.
Baron, who was a First Nations youth of Dean heritage, was the victim of a brutal attempted murder.
Yeah.
He was stabbed 3 times, in the left lung, in the chest, and in the back. And the details in the medical reports we looked at are chilling. That blade stopped exactly 0.5 millimeters from his heart.
0.5 millimeter from a homicide.
Right. And the only reason he didn't suffer 2 more potentially fatal blows is because an iPhone sitting in his jacket pocket physically deflected the blade.
It's wild to think about, but to fully grasp the magnitude of the system's failure that day, you really have to understand Baron's physical reality before the attack even happened.
Yeah, because he wasn't just, an average healthy teenager.
No, not at all. The medical records show he already lived with a permanent condition known as a type 12 plus paraparesis.
I saw that term in the files, but for those of us without a medical degree, what does type 12 plus paraparesis actually mean for his day-to-day life?
So it refers to a severe permanent limitation in motor function and mobility, specifically affecting the lower limbs. And he was diagnosed at age 12 by the Shriners Hospital.
Okay, so this means Baron was already a highly vulnerable Indigenous youth who required specialized care and like structural support.
Precisely. So when an attempted murder happens to someone with that level of pre-existing physical vulnerability, you expect the absolute highest tier of emergency and police response.
You'd expect them to pull out all the stops.
Exactly.
But the documents detailing the Montreal police response, the SPVM, they describe a scene that is just nothing short of chaotic. And frankly, the decisions made that day completely defy logic.
Yeah, they really do.
The armed suspect was let go at the scene. Meanwhile, the police took Barron's 12-year-old sister, who is a U.S. dual citizen minor, and they detained her in the back of a freezing police cruiser for 5 hours.
It points to a really profound rigidity in police protocol. Because instead of securing a vulnerable family, the system seemed to treat the victims with this bizarre, punitive negligence.
Yeah, punitive is the right word there.
And the filings even allege that the police later hypnotized Barron, a traumatized, disabled minor recovering from stab wounds, without a lawyer or a parent present.
Hypnotized. I mean, how is that even standard investigative procedure?
It's hard to wrap your head around.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I have to ask the obvious question here. If a violent crime of this magnitude happens to a disabled child, shouldn't every single alarm bell in the state's child protection system go off?
You would certainly think so.
Like, you would expect an army of social workers and psychologists to just descend on this family the next morning to offer support.
That is the logical assumption, yeah. Because when immediate physical protection fails, a family naturally turns to the state's secondary safety nets, the medical and administrative systems.
Right.
So they reached out to the DPJ, which is the Director of Youth Protection in Quebec, and to the Regional Health Authority, known as CISS Laval.
And the mandate of CISS Laval is literally to deploy emergency care and psychological support to residents in crisis, right?
Exactly. But what the family found wasn't support. It was an intentional, systemic void.
A void. And the audit calls it a 5,589-day void.
Yeah, 5,589 days. Instead of rushing in, the DPJ and CISS Laval outright refused to authorize psychological care for Barron for 10 months following the stabbing.
10 months of nothing.
10 months, and they actually documented this refusal. The state essentially closed its doors, initiating a 14-year timeline of what the audit calls administrative attrition.
Wow. Now, if you're listening to this and wondering how a government agency can just say no to a child who was just stabbed, especially a First Nations child, you need to look at the legal mandates that are supposed to prevent this.
Right.
Isn't there a specific law in Canada designed to stop exactly this kind of abandonment?
There absolutely is. It's called Jordan's Principle, and it is a strict federal legal obligation. Its entire purpose is to ensure that First Nations children receive essential government services like medical care or specialized support within a 48-hour window.
Right. And the mechanism behind it is super important, isn't it? It's supposed to stop the government from arguing over the bill while a child suffers.
Precisely. Because historically, the federal government and the provincial governments would argue for months over who had jurisdiction to pay for an Indigenous child's health care.
Like fighting over the check at dinner, but with medical care.
Yeah, a really grim version of that.
Yeah.
So Jordan's Principle mandates a child-first approach. You provide the care within 48 hours, and the bureaucrats can figure out who pays for it later.
That makes full sense.
But the sovereign audit shows the state breached this strict 48-hour mandate for 14 days. Keep in mind, Barron was a post-surgical cardiac minor recovering from a near-fatal stabbing during this time.
So it's basically like calling 911 because you're having an active heart attack, and the dispatcher doesn't just put you on hold, they actively route your call to an automated out-of-office reply for weeks on end.
That's a very accurate comparison.
It's unfathomable.
But the Sovereign Father didn't just claim this happened. The evidence vault he submitted provides the actual digital footprint of this ghosting.
Oh, absolutely. The digital forensics are what escalate this from a tragic narrative to a $3 billion indictment.
Yeah, tell me about those receipts.
Well, the sources contain intercepted audio and time-stamped read receipts proving that this crisis was pinging the absolute highest levels of government. For instance, there's a time-stamped read receipt from the Office of Justice Minister Sean Fraser at 7:03 a.m. while the crisis was active. 7:03 a.m.
Wow.
And there are also records of automated deflections from the Office of Mark Carney and emails from the Assembly of First Nations, which is, the very body supposed to advocate for Indigenous rights.
Right.
The Sovereign Father tagged them, pleading for help, and they responded with an email asking, "Why are you tagging me on this?" before blocking him entirely.
Unbelievable.
Now, I want to be very careful here just to make sure we stay neutral. we are impartially reporting what is in these source documents. Are we looking at a malicious, coordinated conspiracy by these specific politicians to ignore a child?
I think that's a crucial distinction to make. The audit doesn't necessarily argue that a justice minister was sitting at his desk at 7 a.m., rubbing his hands together and deciding to ignore Barron.
Right, like a cartoon villain.
Exactly. What the documents illustrate is the mechanical failure of massive automated systems. When you build rigid jurisdictional silos, an urgent email might hit a server, generate a read receipt, and then get filtered out by an algorithm or a staffer because it doesn't fit neatly into an expected form or department.
So it just gets lost in the machine.
Yeah. The architecture of silence isn't always a malicious person. Often it's a blind, unyielding bureaucracy that prioritizes its own sorting rules over a citizen's survival.
But here's the missing piece for me. If the state's medical agencies are denying care and the political algorithms are filtering out your pleas for help, that is exactly when a lawyer is supposed to step in.
Yes.
A lawyer files an emergency injunction, they go to a judge, and they force the state's hand.
Mm-hmm.
Where was the family's legal representation during this 14-year void?
That brings us to a secondary layer of the audit, and it reveals a mathematical reality that is just, well, it's hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
The sovereign father conducted a line-by-line forensic analysis of the family's legal aid representation over this entire period. He cross-referenced the law firm's billing records with the plumatif, which is the official court registry in Quebec.
And the numbers in this section of the filings are just wild.
The law firm billed the state for 156 administrative entries. Right. But when you audit the actual physical appearances made in a courtroom to defend this family, there were only approximately 14.
14. I honestly had to read that line in the source documents 3 times to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding the math.
It's staggering.
156 billed administrative entries for 14 actual appearances. That is mathematically an 1,100% taxpayer-funded billing discrepancy. I mean, how does a system even allow that to happen?
Well, you have to look at the incentives built into the legal aid system. The system reimburses lawyers for filing paperwork, reviewing documents, attending administrative meetings, drafting memos, things like that.
All the behind-the-scenes stuff.
Yeah. Actual courtroom litigation is risky, it's time-consuming, and it's adversarial.
Yeah.
So a firm can generate steady revenue by shuffling the files indefinitely without ever striking a definitive blow in court.
It's like hiring a contractor to fix a collapsed roof. And they bill the city 156 times for holding meetings about the roof, drafting memos about the roof, and driving past the house. But they only actually pick up a hammer 14 times.
That's a perfect analogy.
The state happily pays for the paperwork, but the family is still living in the rain.
Exactly. The system is functioning perfectly for the bureaucrats and the lawyers, but entirely failing the citizen. And the result of this passive representation is stark.
Yeah, tell them about the settlement offer.
Right. After 14 years of enduring this systemic attrition, the state-appointed lawyers came back with a settlement offer to permanently close 4 family files.
I know you have the figure there. What did they offer?
The total offer for 4 family members after 14 years of documented state abandonment was $8,505.
Wow.
And they never even filed a class action lawsuit.
Let's break down the reality of that number. 14 years is 5,589 days. If you divide $8,505 by 5,589 days, the legal system basically valued the state's abandonment of a disabled, stabbed First Nations child at roughly $1.51 per day.
It's insulting.
But the failure of the legal system wasn't just a passive lack of help, right? Because while the lawyers were shuffling paperwork, the state actually went on the offensive.
Yes, and this is where the tactic shifts significantly. According to the sovereign audit, the government transitioned from an architecture of silence into a full-blown financial inquisition.
A financial inquisition.
Yeah. The family eventually received a $43,000 victim compensation payment. This was issued by IVC, which is the provincial body that specifically compensates victims of criminal acts for psychological and physical damages.
And victim compensation is legally protected money. It's not income, it's indemnity for trauma.
Correct. It is heavily protected. But here's the jurisdictional clash. Immediately after that IVC payment cleared, a completely different arm of the government, Solidarity Social, which manages provincial welfare, launched a retaliatory financial audit against the family.
And this is the detail that legitimately stopped me in my tracks. To prove the family wasn't hiding assets, the state auditors demanded bank statements from Barron's siblings.
Yes, and keep in mind their ages.
Right. We were talking about children who were 5 and 6 years old. They demanded financial records from kindergartners who do not even have bank accounts.
Yeah. It perfectly illustrates the mechanism of administrative harassment. The goal of this kind of audit isn't to uncover hidden wealth in a kindergartner's non-existent piggy bank.
Obviously not.
The goal is attrition. By freezing welfare support and demanding impossible documentation, the state effectively forced this impoverished family to act as an emergency credit facility.
Right, because if the state isn't paying for the basic survival and medical needs they are legally mandated to cover, someone still has to buy the groceries.
Someone still has to pay for the specialized care.
Exactly. And the family had to put it all on private credit just to keep Barron alive.
And the audit documents prove that this administrative squeeze drove the family into $56,620 of high-interest private debt.
And what rates?
It was compounding at rates between 19.99% and 29.99%.
Okay, I have to challenge this for a second because it sounds almost conspiratorial. Is this just sheer unfathomable bureaucratic incompetence, like a giant machine where the welfare department doesn't talk to the victim compensation department, or do the filings argue this is calculated?
Oh, the source documents explicitly label this as a calculated tactical move.
Really?
Yes. The concept of administrative attrition relies on creating so much friction, so much paperwork, and so much compounding financial distress that the victim simply taps out.
They just give up.
Exactly. If the family gives up, the state gets to strip benefits from a disabled child without ever having to issue a formal, legally challengeable denial. It's death by 1,000 administrative cuts.
But the state made one massive miscalculation. The sovereign father didn't give up.
No, he did not.
Faced with absolute systemic collapse, he didn't submit to the attrition. Instead, he launched a highly calculated counterstrike.
And this is where we finally get to the legal teeth of the $3.098 billion sovereign audit.
Yeah, let's talk about the $3 billion.
Well, the sovereign father isn't just throwing a massive number at the wall out of anger. He is utilizing a landmark Supreme Court of Canada precedent. It's called Roncarelli v. Duplessis.
Wait, Roncarelli v. Duplessis. I'm not a constitutional lawyer.
Yeah.
How does an old Supreme Court case help a modern family strip a bureaucrat of their power?
It's actually one of the most important administrative law cases in Canadian history. The core ruling of Roncarelli establishes that there is no such a thing as absolute, untrammeled discretion for public officials.
Okay.
So if a bureaucrat acts in bad faith, for example, by deliberately ghosting a stabbed child, ignoring a 48-hour federal mandate like Jordan's principle, or launching baseless financial audits against kindergartners, they lose their state immunity.
Oh, wow. So the shield of the crown drops. They can't just hide behind their job title anymore.
Exactly. The sovereign father argues that the architecture of silence provides definitive digital proof of bad faith. Because of that, his legal action is now targeting the personal, provincial, and federal pensions of the specific officials who enforce this ghosting protocol.
Targeting their personal pensions.
Yes, he's going after what are known as the REGOP funds.
REGOP. What is that?
It's the Government and Public Employees Retirement Plan in Quebec. He is legally aiming right at the retirement money of the officials who thought they were untouchable behind their desks.
And what's absolutely fascinating is that the motivation behind this massive counterstrike is deeply rooted in his family's history. The documents outline this incredible ancestral context in the Outaouais region of Quebec.
Yeah, it's a really rich history.
Historically, back in the mid-20th century, that area was actually known as Little Chicago.
Right, and it earned that nickname because the rough, relatively lawless nature of the region during that era. It was a huge hub for cross-border industry, logging, and nightlife.
Yeah, and the filings highlight two specific ancestors of the sovereign father, Jerry Barber and Joe McGovern. These were legendary local figures. In Little Chicago, when official institutions failed or turned a blind eye to danger, Barber and McGovern were the ones who provided physical security for the vulnerable.
They were the community shield.
Exactly. They stepped in when the state advocated its responsibility. And there's this vivid historical account in the sources about a fire in 1951. Tell us what happened there.
The documents detail the 1951 fire at the Standish Hall Hotel, which was a very famous jazz venue in the region. Music legend Louis Armstrong was actually staying there at the time and had to flee the burning building in his underwear.
Crazy image. But what's the connection to the audit?
The relevance to the audit is that during eras of chaos and institutional failure, this family lineage provided order. They guarded the vulnerable when the official systems collapsed.
Man, that context changes everything.
Yep.
It means the sovereign father doesn't look at this $3 billion audit as a quest for a financial payout.
Not at all.
He sees it as the continuation of a century-old ancestral duty. Like, if the modern state refuses to protect his son, Barron, he will invoke the legacy of Little Chicago to hold the state accountable himself.
It perfectly frames the entire legal battle, not as a victim pleading for help from a broken system, but as a sovereign entity demanding accountability for a breached treaty and a broken fiduciary duty.
Okay, let's take a breath and recap the journey we've been on today. We started at the harrowing physical reality of Sunday, Bloody Sunday, on February 14, 2021, where Barron survived a blade half a millimeter from his heart.
And we navigated the maddening 14-year architecture of silence, where Jordan's principle was ignored, while an 1,100% legal aid billing discrepancy just drained the system.
Right, and we saw how the state transitioned from passive neglect to an active financial inquisition, auditing young children and inducing massive private debt to force the family to give up.
And finally, we witnessed a sovereign father weaponizing constitutional precedent to strip the immunity from the invisible bureaucrats, aiming right at their pensions.
It is a profound, meticulously documented case study of systemic failure. And before we close, there is one final, deeply provocative thought from the source documents that I want to leave you with.
Oh, this part is fascinating. Go ahead.
Well, the sources note a really interesting parallel. Because domestic remedies completely failed, the sovereign father eventually escalated this life safety default by filing it directly into the national security record with CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service.
Right, taking it to the highest level.
Exactly. But at the exact same time, the documents point out that the Prime Minister's office was able to seamlessly mobilize $25.5 billion for foreign aid under the banner of Canada Strong.
That is just a staggering contrast in how a government deploys its resources.
It really is. And it raises a chilling question for you to mull over as we end this deep dive. If a state possesses the logistical power to seamlessly project tens of billions of dollars of aid and influence abroad, yet simultaneously deploys its internal administrative algorithms to silently ghost and erase a bleeding First Nations child inside its own borders, do we need to completely redefine what national security actually means?
That is the big question. Are the greatest threats to citizens today really foreign actors across the globe? Or are they the silent, unchecked, invisible bureaucracies operating inside their own governments?
The invisible enemy doesn't need to fight you on a battlefield. They just put you on hold, audit your children, and wait for you to disappear.
It certainly makes you wonder what kind of architecture of silence might be building around us right now.
It absolutely does. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.